Fleeing the violence in Syria, most of the refugees are going to Lebanon. There are now more than 220,000 of them there, mostly in the Bekaa Valley. Doctors Without Borders recently presented its findings on what living conditions are like for these people. We'll have an interview with Bruno Yukoum, head of the organisation, but first here's a look at the refugee crisis.
The second report in 8 months on the refugees from Syria by the humanitarian NGO Doctors Without Borders presents findings gathered in Lebanon in December. The fact finders were in Saida in the south, in the Bekaa Valley in the east, and in Tripoli in the north. Their conclusions were little changed from the first report, except that things are worse. Hundreds of thousands of Syrians have fled their country, some 250,000 into Lebanon alone. Almost that many again into Jordan, more than 170,000 to Turkey, and more than 80,000 to Iraq. Their numbers in Lebanon are now equal to around 6% of the Lebanese population. Most are in the Bekaa Valley. Among those having to fend for themselves is nomadic Samia Gamal's family. She has 15 children. She says, "We rent this tent for $100 a month. It was here when we came." 2 of Samia's daughters have paying work, occasionally. "We don't buy much food," she says, "just bread and vegetables. We don't buy expensive things like chicken or meat. Sometimes we have 1 meal a day, sometimes 2, depending on what we have. Mainly it's soup and rice. A load of firewood costs $150. We need 2 loads a month." Jordan and Turkey have built camps for the Syrian refugees. Lebanon still has not. So anyone who comes has to rent what they can find. More than half the people interviewed by Doctors Without Borders said they could not pay for treatment for chronic illnesses and natal care. An unregistered Syrian refugee must pay any medical bills himself. Registration by the UN Refugee Agency is said to take 2 to 3 months. While waiting, there is very little international assistance.
Bruno Yukoum, Director General of Doctors Without Borders, joins us from Geneva. Doctors Without Borders recently tabled its latest report on living conditions for Syrian refugees in Lebanon. It says that many of them are suffering from shortages of everything. Why this deterioration?
I just got back from a few days there with our medical teams in the Bekaa Valley and Tripoli. What we find is a daily flux of families with women and children crossing the border and finding very little help when they arrive. They have to get by with limited resources when they've just fled a war zone.
Your report shows that a lot of the refugees from Syria are not even registered with the UN Refugee Agency. Why not?
That is a paradox. The refugees are identified pretty fast by the authorities in Lebanese towns, but then the process of registering them for refugee status takes time, much too long, 2 to 3 months. The problem is that that is the condition placed on most of the assistance that is on offer. Obviously, for a family with children in winter, you can't wait that long. It should be possible to deliver help as soon as they arrive, or within a few days.
The Syrian refugees have to pay for medical bills and for shelter, in contrast to those who make it to Jordan or Turkey. Lebanon hasn't built camps for them. If Beirut keeps on with this policy, how do you think things can be improved?
The
priority is providing at least minimum collective shelter and camps if the influx of people leaves no alternative. Around half the refugees in Lebanon are obliged to rent rooms or apartments with their own money. The other half, with what they have, are living in buildings that are under construction, on a farm or in a garage, more or less wherever they can. It's often in places without windows, without heating, and with 10 to 15 people to a room.
Bruno Yacoum, you're a regular in the field. You've been to Somalia, Sudan and Afghanistan. What's your analysis of the Syrian humanitarian crisis?
What's most striking is the degree of violence the warring parties are using, and that several times medical personnel and patients have been targeted. We also have to understand that these are middle class and people of modest means, poor people who were living peacefully until recently. The world is crumbling for them. People like you and me find themselves forced to flee residential areas, and they need international solidarity to deploy fast, at a level that answers to their needs.
Bruno Yacoum, je rappelle que vous êtes le directeur général de Médecins sans frontières. Merci d'être intervenu sur l'antenne d'Euronews.
Je vous remercie.